Welcome to the Fit Woman Formula podcast, where we show women just like you how to reclaim your energy, rebuild your body, and step into you 2.0. I'm Coach Jonathan, founder and head coach of the Fit Woman Formula coaching program. This show is for women who are tired of starting over and ready to finally create results that last. Not just weight loss, but real confidence, a healthier relationship with food, a stronger mindset, and a lifestyle that finally lasts. You can watch full episodes on YouTube or listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you enjoy podcasts. And if you're ready to learn more about how we can help you unlock the energy and confidence of your 20s while dropping 2+ sizes in the next 12 weeks, visit fitwomanformula.com. All right, let's get into today's episode. Before I ever coached a single person, before the Fit Woman Formula existed, my life looked very different. Very different. And to understand why I coach the way that I do today, you really have to understand the journey that got me here. So growing up, I was the chubby kid. And don't get me wrong, I had friends. I wasn't shy or anything like that. I was social. I was outgoing. But look, if I'm being honest, my self-esteem wasn't great. There are certain moments I can remember from my childhood that definitely stuck with me. I remember one time, for instance, I was on a trip with one of my best friends. We were with his family, and we were all hanging out at the pool. I think it was like Disney or something like that. And there was this girl that I thought was really cute. Worked up the courage to ask her to hang out, and she said no. And that wasn't enough. Then she followed up with something that probably seemed harmless to her. But she said, but it's not because you're fat. And I remember thinking, if you had to say that, it probably is because I'm fat. Moments like that stay with you, even if you try to laugh them off. Now, looking back, just in considering kind of my relationship with food, okay, because that's a big part of what we're helping women with these days. Looking back, now I can see that my relationship with food wasn't always great either. One memory that just really stands out to me when I was about 5 or 6 years old, my mom and dad and I, we lived in New Orleans. We moved here to Houston. My dad worked for a hotel company, and really amazing. We couldn't find a house initially. He was managing a hotel here in Houston. So we actually ended up living in the presidential suite of the hotel for a short period of time. Okay. This is like something out of a movie. Now, to a kid, that's amazing, right? Now, here's the problem with this. Okay. There was a mini bar in my room. And apparently, every couple days, I was just wiping it out. My mom eventually realized, what was going on because they would come in and they kept restocking the mini bar because I was just crushing everything in it. Looking back now, it's funny, but it's probably one of the earliest signs that food was something I could easily overdo. It was probably maybe a little foreshadowing in addiction to come down the line, in, some of my experiences with things like binge eating and overeating. And again, just not having a great relationship with food. Now, over the years, my body changed a lot. I sometimes joke that I looked like 10 different people over the years, at different points in my life. And at my heaviest, I was about 90 pounds overweight. And during those years, I never really had a consistent relationship with my health. Sometimes I would kind of try to get in shape. Most of the time, I wouldn't really care at all. A couple times here and there, I'd maybe go to the gym or something like that. But there was always this feeling in the back of my mind that I wanted to change. And the biggest struggle, though, was not really with my physical health or with my weight. And it wasn't addiction to food. It was addiction to other substances. So kind of fast forward to high school. High school for me revolved around one thing: weed. I jokingly say high school wasn't high school. It was weed school, or it was about getting high school. That's all I really cared about. And I remember the first time that I smoked weed was the year in between, the summer in between 8th grade and my freshman year of high school. And I remember just feeling like this is it. The first time I got high, this is it. This is the feeling I've been looking for, you know? And after that, school didn't matter much at all. Sports didn't matter much. I played football my freshman year of high school just because all my friends were. Yeah, I was focused on getting high. And I quickly realized that the way that I looked at weed and substances in general was just different from a lot of people. Most people could use this occasionally or do this occasionally or smoke occasionally, you know? For me, it was something that I wanted all the time. Things escalated very quickly. I was someone that was immediately looking for it all the time, thinking about it all the time, wanting more and more. And, people say, kind of argue about, weed being a gateway drug or not. For me, I can just say it was. I can't really talk about anyone else. For me, it was. And, I immediately wanted to do it alone. And again, I was just obsessed. It was consuming my mind. And one thing that is just, if I'm being very honest about my story here, one thing that was an ongoing theme in my story was, unfortunately, selling drugs as well. I had always had kind of an entrepreneurial mindset, if you will, and drive. I was always the kid killing it when I was selling candy for Little League, and I'd come up with my own things like selling baseball cards and selling stuff door to door and all kinds of different stuff. I always loved stuff like that. And so this kind of made sense for me. And also, it was like, okay, well, I can smoke for free and kind of get free stuff just by selling it, right? And I think also for me, definitely during high school, there was this social aspect that came along with it, right? Because it was like, okay, the guy that's selling weed or whatever, people want this guy around. They're calling you. They want you around. There's kind of an element of coolness around all of this, right? And so I kind of like that too. And eventually things progress. And part of the reason that things progressed is because, again, this entrepreneurial or like business mindset. I would see kind of an opening and a market for a certain drug, if you will. I'd say, okay, well, I'm going to start selling that. And then eventually I'd say, what is it that people like about this? What is it that people like about this drug? Cocaine or pills or whatever it was. And eventually I'd try it. And so along the way, I started getting into harder and harder drugs. I started crossing all these lines that I said I would never cross. And where it eventually got to was prescription painkillers. And so at my worst, I was taking around 60 to 70 painkillers and muscle relaxers a day. Honestly, looking back, I'm not really sure how I survived. It's kind of hard to believe. And eventually things started to catch up with me. It wasn't fun anymore. I have to be honest about this. Initially, it was fun. Initially, it was fun and it was enjoyable. But, it's things like run-ins with the police, blackouts, really dangerous situations. And I don't like getting into this stuff too much, but just to give you an idea of kind of where my mind was, there was a moment where I was probably about 5 minutes away from the condo that I was living in at the time. And I had been up, there was this weird thing, people that are addicted like this, they find like their little rituals and their things, their exact combinations of things that they like, right? And so my thing was Monster energy drinks and muscle relaxers and painkillers. And between this combination, I would stay up for like 2 days at a time. It was a really weird thing. I guess I thought I was kind of balancing things out. And so I ended up blacking out at a red light. Very long story short, I woke up. There were cops all around me. I was literally stopped at a red light. I had an IV in my arm. They thought that I was diabetic. And so I had an IV in my arm. And when I came to, they kind of got the idea of what was going on. Okay, this guy is on something. They put me in the back of the cop car. I was in handcuffs. And even though I knew there was no way that these cops were going to do this, I said, officers, please, I'm 5 minutes from home. Please take me home. And they looked at each other and they were like, look, we're not going to leave you by yourself. We have to leave you with someone else. Like, fine, my friend lives in another apartment. I'm sure he's home. And they said, okay, but look, we're still going to have to tow your car. And so they bring my car, they bring me in the cop car back to my condo, literally like 2 blocks away. The tow truck driver, I have to go pay him. And the tow truck driver is this guy, I swear I've never seen before in my whole life. And I'm being a smart ass. And he says, you should really get some help. And I was like, what? I don't even know you. What are you talking about, basically? And he was like, yeah, man, you don't remember over on the north side of town about 6 months ago, you ran over that school zone sign and I was there to make sure that you didn't get arrested. Sure enough, it was this same exact tow truck driver. I mean, it was like a guardian angel thing, but Look, for most people, it sounds like one of these like bad Jeff Foxworthy jokes. It's like, if the same tow truck driver is showing up, that's a sign that you might be an addict or you might have a problem. That did not even cross my mind. The thing that crossed my mind is that they didn't find the drugs that I have in the car. That was the only thing I cared about. I wasn't going to jail. They didn't find the drugs in the car. I can keep doing what I need to do. That should have been a wake-up sign. There were a lot of dangerous situations like that. Things could have been way, way worse. And eventually, life got completely out of control. Got completely out of control. But addiction has a way of convincing you that everything is fine when clearly it isn't. The moment that changed my life wasn't really dramatic. It was actually pretty small. I had planned to go get pills one more time. And, just one more time. I don't know how many times I had done that over the years, one more time, one more time. And I walked outside and I accidentally locked my keys in my car. And there was something in that moment that just like broke through everything. The truth was, I was just exhausted mentally, physically, emotionally. And I finally admitted to myself that I couldn't keep living like this. I had let my girlfriend, Elizabeth, who is now my wife, more about that in a moment. No, she knew what was going on, of course, because I couldn't hold all this together. I wasn't able to hold down a job or anything like that. And eventually I had to let my parents know what was going on. And just to kind of rewind briefly, there were moments where I thought I had this under control. Where I thought I had this under control. And I would do little like outpatient rehab type things where I would go and get medication to try to get off the pain pills and all that stuff. And I never did anything along with it. I never did any of the counseling. I never did any meetings, like 12-step meetings or anything like that. I would go and get the medication and that alone never did it for me. I would always end up going back to the drugs. And to be clear, like drinking was there too. Like I don't drink. I'm completely abstinent from everything now. And that was a struggle for me, and I'm sure other people can relate to this. For me, the real problem was I didn't think I was an alcoholic or I had an issue with alcohol because, that wasn't the main thing I wanted. The problem was is that whenever I drank, I would go get what I really wanted. I would end up back at the pain pills again. So I just finally realized that I had to stay away from all of it. So on May 14th of 2013, I finally went to rehab and I immediately felt something that I hadn't felt in years. I immediately felt relief. The next day was my first day sober. That was May 15th of 2013. And I made a decision for the first time really since I can remember. I would say, if I'm being honest, the last time that I can remember saying to myself, you're going to take this seriously, you're going to put real effort into this, probably would have been baseball when I was like 12 or 13 years old. I loved baseball when I was younger. I made the all-star team like every year. Chunky Kid was playing catcher, behind the plate. I was like forced to be catcher, but I was really good at it. And so I decided when I went to treatment, I was gonna put real effort into this. I was gonna take recovery seriously. After I got out of rehab, I was really just trying to piece things together. And it was just a really weird time to say the least. I was, still with Elizabeth at the time, and we were living together, and we were just kind of getting used to that again because I was away for about a month. And so around this time, I had started attending 12-step meetings. And right around the corner from one of these meetings that I was able to walk to right down the street from where I was living at the time, there was a small kind of like mom and pop gym that was right around the corner. And, I wasn't a trainer. I worked the front desk. I cleaned bathrooms, really basic stuff. I needed some humility for sure. And I'll tell you that that environment changed my life. I remember that right after I got out of rehab, I was kind of looking through my phone and I had this note that I had put in like Google Notes or something like that. And it was from years prior, and it was Jonathan's sobriety plan. And the first thing on there probably should have been get sober. The first thing on there was actually get in great shape. The first thing on there was take care of yourself, take care of your health, get in great shape. And so the gym became a place where I could really rebuild myself mentally and physically. It really helped calm my mind. It helped manage my anxiety. This is something that I share with a lot of the ladies that I work with, that are maybe just now starting to get into the gym that are experiencing some of these things. They might not be suffering from addiction or anything like that, but they're struggling with anxiety. They're struggling with other issues like this. The gym for me was such a huge help with this, and I didn't understand at the time. There's so much research behind all of this. There is a lot of research behind all of this. And so it helped manage my anxiety. It helped give me structure. It helped fill a lot of time. The last thing that I needed, if I was really going to kind of restart my life here, I didn't need free time. That's for sure. I needed to start fresh. For the first time, I just realized how powerful fitness could be. And it was just a huge, huge help for me. And there's also a lot of research. Another reason that I know for sure that this was helpful to me, there's a lot of research around those who have abused opiates like I was and being able to stay sober long term, what regular exercise can do for you. So I know that was just a big, big help. And I think one of the biggest things for me was, I started building self-esteem and confidence because I was doing something for myself that was actually a good, healthy thing. Yeah, I didn't have anything healthy, any healthy habits or anything like that in such a long time. So how did this lead to me becoming a coach? How did this lead to me getting into training or any of that? Honestly, it's kind of weird. One day I was just having a conversation with my dad about what I should do with my life. And at the time, I had kind of been thinking, okay, well, I'm just going to go into physical therapy. That just kind of makes sense. And so I got connected with like a family friend. I went and did some observation somewhere where they did physical therapy. It just didn't really excite me. Honestly, it was a bunch of older ladies getting new knees and hips, which was fine. It just wasn't really where I wanted to be. It didn't excite me at all. And I was having this conversation with my dad, and he said, something that seems so obvious now, but he said, "You love working out. Why don't you just become a personal trainer?" I was just like, wow, why the hell didn't I think of that? It seemed so obvious once he said it. So while I was working the front desk and cleaning bathrooms at this little gym, I started getting my first certification. This was my first NASM certification for a certified personal trainer. And that was the beginning of my coaching career. And so I started training people locally. I bartered with one of my first clients that they would give me the little pass or the key fob to get into their apartment gym if I gave them a discount on training. And then I just started building a business from there. I had to be very secretive about going into this apartment gym and make sure that none of the staff or people working in the office saw me. But eventually, I started training people in my garage. So Elizabeth and I moved into a house, and I converted our garage into what is still a really nice gym setup. And interestingly, most of my early clients were women, and working with those women taught me something really important. The biggest struggles for them were not the workouts. It was not the workouts. It was the mindset. It was food. It was body image. It was years of dieting. It was years of failing. It was years of constant negative self-talk. And a lot of the struggles that they describe, I understood. I totally got that. Like, no, I'm not a woman, but I really got where these ladies were coming from. Things like the all or nothing mindset, the guilt around food, the cycle of restriction and overeating. And just to touch on that, I had a lot of moments where I think like a lot of ladies do, It was this start over Monday stuff. So I couldn't figure out how to balance the food. And so I was one of those guys that would make just like disgusting, flavorless chicken breast and broccoli, and I would prep a bunch of it and put it all in meal containers and eat that Monday through Friday, and then Friday evening when Elizabeth and I would go out to eat, I would get upset because I knew that I couldn't control myself, and it was just this constant back and forth. So I understood all that because this was stuff that I had to learn how to overcome myself over time. Working with all of these ladies one-on-one in-person training eventually evolved into online coaching. Some of my first mentors when I was getting into, and like some of the first books I was reading and things like that, when I was first getting into personal training, these people started moving into online coaching. And I started learning more about that, and it really started to click. It started to make sense to me because I realized that, okay, most of these women are working with me, let's say 3 hours a week. Well, there's 165 hours in the week that we're not looking at. We're not looking at the habits. We're not looking at the routines. We're not looking at the mindset. We're not looking at all of these bigger picture things that need to be looked at that are way more important than just the workouts or getting a good sweat, right? So eventually, that work is what became the Fit Woman formula. And today, we've helped hundreds of women rebuild their relationship with food, reclaim their energy, and transform their bodies in a really sustainable way. And, today I have an amazing life. The reason I share about all of this in large part is I want people to know that recovery is possible. And I had a client once that said, they weren't in recovery, but they said that, everyone's kind of recovering from something. I think that's true. I think that's true. I am not anything special. I just gave you a glimpse into my past. If I can get things on track, if I can figure this out, then you can absolutely do the same. I think people need to hear that. Now what do things look like today? Well, I'm married to Elizabeth, who saw me through all this craziness, right? We actually have known each other since middle school. We first started dating in middle school. She's seen me through every phase of my life, different sizes, different struggles. And I love her to death because she supported me through all of it. She is just absolutely awesome. Absolutely awesome. She's always been there for me, always supported me. And today we have two beautiful daughters, Ellie and Emma, and they're 2 and 5 years old. And, my three girls are just my entire world. My entire world. Being a husband and a father changed how I see what I do. Because what I know is that, on one hand, I think about just the way things are for women and body image and things like that. And even though, again, I'm not a woman, I want to be able to set a good example and guide my girls, into the world, knowing what's going on and help shape that and make sure they have a healthy relationship with their bodies and with themselves, and that they're confident and they're not falling into so many traps that so many women of all ages, these days do and have been for years. This isn't anything new. But I also know that when a woman transforms her life, it doesn't just change her life. It changes her energy. It changes her confidence. It changes her family. It changes her future. And that's why this work matters so much to me. And I'll end on this one last thing. I've been asked at times, sometimes just in conversation with my parents, sometimes in talking with friends, sometimes, just in situations where I'm sharing my story kind of like this. And I've given people some insight into, kind of how I grew up. I didn't grow up in a bad neighborhood or anything like that. I was very privileged, and had everything that I wanted. I never wanted for anything. This addiction stuff doesn't discriminate, but people will ask me, but what if you had kept going down that road, where you grew up in the good neighborhood and all of that? Like, what would that look like today? I've thought about that. I really have. But this is what I know to be true for me. I would choose this path over and over because it's brought me to where I am today. It's known as like the hero's journey. And so there's kind of this downfall. And there's a reason to come back stronger, and you build courage and confidence and all of these different things through struggle. And I wouldn't have experienced any of that. I wouldn't have had any of this, yes, sometimes very shitty and very dark, but real life experience. I truly believe the life that I have today is better. It's better. I'm glad I went through all of this. And if anything, I'm glad I went through it. And this is where my recovery connects to all of this. And again, how I coach and what our coaching program is all about, and kind of the foundations behind that, which we'll get into more in this podcast. Going through that, if I am able to share my experience with one person, then it was worth it. If it makes a difference for them, then it was worth it on both the addiction and recovery side of things and the health side of things. I've said a lot that I made all these mistakes with my health and the back and forth and the gaining the weight and the losing the weight and doing a million things wrong and all that. I made all these mistakes so that you ladies don't have to. I did all the experimenting so that I can help you get out of that. And that's why this work matters so much to me. So in the next episode, we're going to talk about something that might sound a little bit strange at first. If you want to lose weight, you might actually need to stop chasing weight loss. I know that sounds weird. We're going to get into that a little bit more. But, one of the biggest mistakes most women make when they start trying to lose weight is they're focusing on the wrong thing first. And once you understand this concept, it completely changes how the process should work. So in the next episode, we're going to break down why so many weight loss attempts fail and what you should focus on instead. And that wraps up today's episode of the Fit Woman Formula podcast. I hope today's conversation helped you take one more step toward reclaiming your energy, rebuilding your body, and stepping into you 2.0. If you found this helpful, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss future episodes. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, I'd really appreciate it if you left a quick rating or review. It helps more women discover the show. Ready to unlock the energy and confidence of your 20s while dropping 2+ sizes in the next 12 weeks without restricted diets, useless supplements, or living in the gym? Visit fitwomanformula.com to learn how we've helped hundreds of women just like you. I'll see you in the next episode.